I sat in the humid silence of the Savannah probate court and watched my brother Benedict explain to a judge why I needed to be locked away. He used words like unstable and danger to herself, with the same clinical precision he used in his plastic surgery practice. Behind him, my parents wept into silk handkerchiefs, performing the role of heartbroken aristocrats to perfection. I did not scream. I did not object. I simply touched the small, cold recorder hidden in my pocket and remembered the text Benedict sent me hours ago. We are doing this because we love you. That was the moment I knew. Love wasn't their motivation. It was their alibi. Before I tell you exactly how my brother destroyed himself in the next 10 minutes, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from. I want to know who is on the side of the truth. To understand why I sat silent in that courtroom, letting them paint me as a madwoman, you have to go back 3 months to the reading of my grandfather's will. That was the day the polite veneer of the Vance family finally cracked, revealing the rot underneath. We were gathered in the library of the main estate, a room that smelled of old leather and generational secrets. My grandfather, a man who had spent his life collecting beauty to balance out the ugliness of his kin, had left a testament that shocked everyone but me. He left the entire Savannah estate, valued at $15 million, and his private art collection solely to me, to Octavia. The quiet one. The one who lived in the carriage house and smelled like turpentine. Benedict did not inherit a dime. Neither did my parents. The explosion wasn't immediate. It was a slow, suffocating pressure. You see, Benedict was the golden child. In my parents' eyes, he was the sun around which our entire universe revolved. He was the brilliant plastic surgeon, the charmer, the legacy. I was just the orbit, existing only to reflect his light or absorb his darkness. But grandfather saw the truth. He knew Benedict wasn't a success. He was a black hole. He knew about the gambling debts Benedict tried to pass off as bad investment luck. He knew that if he left the estate to Benedict, it would be liquidated within a week to pay off bookies in Atlantic City. When the lawyer left, the performance began. My mother, Genevieve, dried her eyes instantly. She looked at me not with pride but with a terrifying intensity. She told me that Benedict was in trouble. She said he owed people money, dangerous people, and that we had to sell the estate immediately to save him. She called it saving the family name. I looked at them sitting there on the velvet sofas, and I finally saw the invisible chain that had bound me my entire life. It is a strange and painful thing to realize you were never really a daughter. You were a utility. I was the scapegoat, the vessel they poured their shame into so they could remain pristine. When Benedict failed a test, it was because I distracted him. When he crashed his car, it was because I upset him. I was the designated loser in a game rigged for him to win. They needed me to be weak so he could appear strong. They needed me to be invisible so he could shine. But grandfather had handed me the keys to the kingdom, and for the first time in my life I refused to hand them over. I told them no. I told them I wasn't selling the estate to cover a gambling debt. I told them I was turning the main house into a sanctuary for women recovering from financial and emotional abuse, a place where they could heal through art. The silence that followed that declaration was absolute. I watched my father's face turn a shade of purple I had never seen before. Benedict laughed, a cold, sharp sound. He looked at me with pure hatred and said, "You would put strangers in our ancestral home before you would help your own flesh and blood?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes. Because those strangers deserve a safe harbor. You deserve a consequence." That was the moment the war started. I didn't know it then, but by refusing to play my role, by refusing to be the obedient scapegoat who sets herself on fire to keep the golden child warm, I had become something far worse in their eyes. I had become the enemy. And as I walked out of the library that day, leaving them to their panic and their rage, I knew they wouldn't just let me keep the house. They would come for me. I just didn't realize how dirty they were willing to fight until I found the knife in my studio. 3 days later, I walked into my studio, the converted carriage house that had been my sanctuary since I was 18. The air usually smelled of linseed oil and cedar, a scent that grounded me. But that afternoon it smelled of something sharp and metallic, like wet iron. I saw the easel first. It was overturned. And then I saw the canvas. It was the portrait of my grandfather I had been restoring for 6 months. It wasn't just damaged, it was executed. The canvas had been slashed repeatedly from top to bottom, the fabric hanging in ribbons like flayed skin. A jar of cadmium red paint had been thrown against it, splattering the floor and the walls, creating a gruesome, violent tableau that looked terrifyingly like a crime scene. I stood there, my keys digging into my palm, unable to breathe. This wasn't just vandalism. This was a message. This was a promise. "Oh, Octavia," a voice said from the shadows. "Look what you've done." Benedict stepped out from the corner of the room. He was wearing his white lab coat, impeccable as always, his face arranged in a mask of tragic concern. But his eyes were dead. "I tried to tell Mom and Dad you were spiraling," he said, shaking his head. "But they didn't want to believe it. Violent outburst. Destruction of property. It's a textbook manic episode." "Get out," I whispered. "I can't do that," he said softly. "I called for help. For your own good." Sirens cut through the humid air outside. Blue lights flashed against the windows of the studio, illuminating the red paint like blood. Benedict walked to the door and opened it for the officers. "In here," he told them, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Please be gentle. She's not herself. She's off her medication." 2 officers entered, hands on their belts. They looked at the destroyed room. They looked at the red paint splattered on the walls. And then they looked at me standing there trembling, looking for all the world like a woman who had just snapped. Benedict was the respected surgeon, the pillar of the community. I was the reclusive artist in a carriage house. The narrative wrote itself. "Ma'am," one officer said, stepping toward me. "We need you to come with us." He did this. I wanted to scream. "He cut the painting. He's lying." The scream built in my chest, hot and desperate. I wanted to tear at them to force them to see the truth. But then a cold clarity washed over me. This was the trap. This was the sanity defense. I realized in that split second that if I screamed, I proved him right. If I fought, I was the violent, unstable sister he needed me to be. To a stranger, a woman screaming that her doctor brother is framing her sounds exactly like a paranoid delusion. Benedict was counting on my rage. He was banking on me losing control so he could take control. So I did the one thing he didn't expect. I went gray. I became a stone. I locked my jaw, swallowed the scream, and let my face go completely blank. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't point a shaking finger at my brother. When the officer reached for my arm, I turned around and offered my wrists. I saw Benedict's smile falter. He wanted a show. He wanted a scene he could describe in court later. I gave him nothing but silence. They put me in the back of the cruiser. I watched through the wire mesh as Benedict stood in the driveway looking disappointed. He picked up his phone, probably to call our parents and tell them the tragic news that their daughter had finally broken. The next 72 hours were a study in endurance. The psychiatric hold is designed to break you, to strip you of your agency. They took my shoelaces. They took my phone. They put me in a room with fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. Doctors came in to evaluate me, asking questions about voices I didn't hear and shadows I didn't see. I answered them calmly, succinctly. I ate the terrible food. I sat on the cot and meditated. I treated the cell not as a cage but as a waiting room, because I knew something Benedict didn't. I knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Every hour I spent in that room without cracking was another crack in his story. Kaylin got me out. It took her less than 6 hours after the 72-hour hold expired. She walked into the evaluation center armed with my medical records, which showed zero history of psychosis, and a threat to sue the hospital for unlawful detainment if they held me a minute longer without a court order. The doctors, finding me frighteningly sane, released me. When I walked out into the sunlight, I expected another attack. I expected legal papers, a restraining order, something loud. Instead, I found my parents waiting on my front porch. Genevieve was wearing a simple cotton dress, not her usual silk. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, leaving her looking older, softer, more vulnerable. Alistair stood behind her, his head bowed, holding a casserole dish. It was a scene so perfectly curated it felt like a hallucination. "Octavia," my mother whispered when she saw me. She rushed forward and fell to her knees right there on the gravel path. "I didn't know," she sobbed, clutching my hand. "We didn't know he went that far. We thought he was just worried about you. When we found out he called the police. When we saw the studio." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "He lied to us, Octavia. Benedict told us you were off your meds. He told us you were threatening suicide. We were terrified." My father stepped forward. "We're so sorry," he said, his voice thick. "We've been blind. We let him manipulate us because we wanted to believe he was successful. But we see it now. We see what he is." I looked at them. I looked at the casserole dish. I looked at my mother's tear-stained face. A part of me, the part of me that was 5 years old and just wanted to be held, wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that the spell had finally broken, that my brother's cruelty had gone too far even for them. "We want to make it right," Genevieve pleaded. "Please. Come to dinner on Sunday. Just us. We're going to tell Benedict he's out. We're cutting him off. We're removing him from the family trust. We want you there to see it. We want to start over." "Sunday," I repeated. "Yes. A reconciliation dinner. Please, Octavia. Give us a chance to be the parents you deserve." I looked at the house looming behind them. It was a beautiful trap. But traps only work if you don't know they're there. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'll come." My mother wept with relief. She hugged my legs. My father nodded, looking relieved. They left promising my favorite roast lamb, promising a new beginning. As their car pulled away, I felt a cold chill settle in my bones. They were good. They were very good. The performance was flawless. The remorse felt real. But they had forgotten one thing. I was an artist. I spent my life looking at layers. I knew how to spot a forgery. The tears were real, but the timing was too perfect. Benedict was their investment. He was their retirement plan, their social standing. They wouldn't cut him off because he got a little rough with me. They would only cut him off if he cost them money. And right now I was the one costing them money. I walked into my studio and picked up a small velvet box from my desk. Inside was a vintage diamond brooch, an heirloom I'd bought at an estate sale years ago. But I hadn't bought it for the diamonds. I had modified it. Behind the center stone was a high-definition lens. Inside the filigree setting was a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a whisper from across a room. If they wanted a dinner, I would give them a dinner. But I wasn't going as a guest. I was going as a witness. The main dining room of the Vance estate was a masterpiece of Southern Gothic oppression. Dark wood paneling swallowed the light from the crystal chandelier. The table was set with heavy silver and fine china, a display of wealth that felt more like a fortress than a home. Benedict was there. Of course he was. Benedict sat in his usual place, calm and unrepentant, while my parents played gracious hosts. The tears and threats to cut him off had vanished the moment I arrived. This was no reconciliation. It was a setup. When my father poured the wine, I caught the scent immediately. Sweet, nutty almond. Not Bordeaux. Sedative. They weren't trying to fix things. They were trying to erase me. I pretended to drink, coughing and spitting the wine into my napkin, then waited. Minutes later, I slurred my words and let my body go slack. They whispered openly about the dose, the notary waiting, the plan to force me to sign power of attorney and declare me mentally unfit. Inside, I was fully conscious. The camera on my chest recorded everything. In court the next day, Benedict testified flawlessly, painting me as unstable. My parents supported him with practiced grief. The judge was moments from granting the conservatorship when my lawyer submitted one final exhibit. The video played. Their voices filled the courtroom. The confession, the poisoning, the plan. Benedict panicked, shouting deep fake, until a second video appeared. Him days earlier destroying my grandfather's painting to frame me. That act triggered the clause he forgot about. By damaging the art, he forfeited his entire inheritance. The judge ordered all three arrested. 6 months later, the estate reopened as an art sanctuary. I kept the ruined portrait exactly as it was, not as damage but as proof of survival. And for the first time, I walked forward without carrying anyone else's lies.